up to offer more than 1,000 of the most commonly ordered blood diagnostic tests, all without the need for a syringe. Was that statement correct?
Reading it now, I don't think it is.
For a time, Elizabeth Holmes was once called the youngest self-made billionaire by Forbes magazine at just 30 years old. She was basically at the top of the ladder, but a few crazy years later, and she's being sentenced to a little over 11 years in prison. What the heck is the story here, and where is she now? I'm Adam Andrews, and let's talk about it. Elizabeth Holmes comes from a family that were very interested in status and lived for connections, according to a family friend. Her parents were bureaucrats on Capitol Hill, and her great-great-great-grandfather on her dad's side was the founder of Fleischmann's Yeast, a company that changed America's bread industry. So it's safe to say that Holmes probably felt a great deal of pressure to be impactful. She wanted to discover something that we as people had never discovered before. A Stanford dropout at 19 years old, Holmes founded a blood testing startup company called Theranos, with the intention of developing a device called the Edison that could diagnose diseases in a patient with just a prick of the finger and a minuscule amount of blood. The idea broke headlines and had some big name people investing large sums of their money into the Silicon Valley star. Henry Kissinger and General James Mattis were on the board, with US Treasury Secretary George Shultz, media tycoon Rupert Murdoch, software tycoon Larry Ellison, and the family that founded Walmart, the Waltons, were some of her biggest backers. It was a big deal. At its peak in 2014, the company was worth $9 billion when Holmes was just 30 years old. But as time went on, even within just a year of her self-made billionaire status, it became more and more clear that the technology Holmes' company was profiting from was maybe not everything it had been chalked up to be. In 2015, thanks to a whistleblower, concerns were raised about the Edison. Then, the Wall Street Journal wrote a handful of articles exposing that the results of the tests were unreliable, and that instead of the Edison, the firm had been using regular commercially available machines from other companies to do a large majority of its testing. Now, by 2016, it was completely obvious that the technology did not work, and that Holmes was a fake, with lawsuits flooding in, partners cutting ties, and the US regulators banning Holmes from operating her blood testing service for 2 years. Things were crumbling all around. Theranos was accused of inaccurate test results and was investigated by the Securities of Exchange Commission, the Department of Justice, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services even said that the company posed a quote, immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. By 2018, Holmes was charged by the SEC with massive fraud for raising $700 million from her investors. The company that she founded with her partner and at the time lover, Ramesh Sunny Balwani, Theranos' chief operating officer, officially shut down in 2019. Now, both Holmes and Balwani were arrested on charges of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud, with prosecutors claiming that Holmes knowingly misled patients about the tests being done and over-exaggerated the performance of her firm to the financial backers. But Holmes stuck with her original story. In 2019, Holmes also curiously accused Mr. Balwani of not only being wholly responsible for the failure of Theranos, but she also misaccused him of mistreating Holmes during their relationship, which he completely denies. Now, whether that is true remains to be seen. Prosecutors were going for the jugular, requesting that Holmes face 15 years in prison for her crimes and pay $800 million in restitution to the investors. Elizabeth's attorneys on the opposing side of the argument had said that she should not face prison time on the grounds that Holmes was and is not a danger to society, with Holmes asking the court for a sentence of 18 months of house arrest, with her lawyer calling her a loving and dedicated mother and partner. By this time in her life, Holmes was with her partner William Billy Evans, who was the heir to the Evans Hotel Group, and together they had a son in 2021, with a second one on the way. And after the trial took place, she was living out on a $500,000 bond secured through property with Evans in California in a 74-acre, $135 million mansion in the Green Gables estate in Woodside, California that belonged to Evans. Elizabeth's defense gave testimony from over 130 people, including a senator, Cory Booker. But in opposition to this, the prosecutor said that Holmes was blinded by ambition that put people, the patients, in harm's way. Now, on January 3rd, 2022, after a 4-month-long trial, Elizabeth was found guilty on 4 of 7 counts of criminal fraud against her investors, with the jury unable to unanimously agree on 3 other charges. Holmes was also acquitted on 4 additional charges that were related to patient fraud. In November of 2022, Holmes was finally sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in prison for her crimes, with 3 more months of supervised release after she had done her time in the slammer. In the photos taken outside the courthouse, Holmes, who is currently 38, was hella pregnant, which means she will likely give birth to her second child before she turns herself into federal authorities on April 27th of this year to start serving her time. Now, as for where she will be incarcerated, Holmes won't find out exactly where she's going until she gets closer to her surrender date, which may be delayed if she appeals her sentencing, which I believe she has indeed done. Now, assuming she does go, which is most likely the case, the Bureau of Prisons makes the ultimate decision on where inmates are housed. Usually, inmates are placed at prisons within 500 miles of their loved ones. In November, Judge Edward Davila of the Northern District of California recommended that Holmes serve her sentence at a federal prison camp in Bryan, Texas, but Holmes could also go to the federal prison camp for women at Victorville, a minimum security facility about 85 miles northwest of Los Angeles. Or she could even go closer to home at Federal Correctional Institution Dublin, which is a low-security women's prison. This is actually the same facility where actresses Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin served their sentences after the 2019 college admission scandal. Now, considering the fact that Holmes has 1 child with another one almost here, it's also worth talking about visitation time. According to the Bureau of Prisons website, an inmate gets at least 4 hours of visiting time per month, but usually the prison can provide more if it decides to. Prisoners also usually receive 300 minutes a month of time on the phone to talk to their loved ones, which comes at a cost of 21 cents a minute. Obviously, 300 minutes comes up pretty quickly when you're talking to your loved ones, and apparently prisoners go over this limit all the time, needing to wait weeks until their next month comes, just to talk to their families. When COVID was at its peak, this phone time was increased to 500 minutes, but the act that made that happen may not still be in place when Holmes is incarcerated. It's also worth noting that she very likely won't serve the entire 11 years and 3 months in prison unless she is on her worst rich girl behavior, which I kinda doubt it. Under federal law, prisoners usually serve 85% of their sentences, which means that Holmes could end up serving a little over 9.5 years wherever she goes. On top of that, prisoners can also take 6 months or 10% off that 85% that they serve, which in Holmes' case could end up meaning her time served could end up being a little over 8.5 years. And then she can also shave about a year off of her sentence if she takes part in programming or classes. So if she is on her best behavior and takes classes and all that jazz, she could be out of that place in about 7.5 years. That is still a large chunk of her children's lives. Do we feel bad for her? That's ultimately up to you. She didn't commit a crime that really injured anyone or took another person's life, but she did commit massive amounts of fraud, taking large amounts of money from already incredibly filthy rich people, but also from everyday people who invested large amounts of their savings only to lose it all. There has already been a large amount of media about this case put out into the world, starting with that book that first revealed the scam in the first place, John Carreyrou's Bad Blood: Secrets and Lies of a Silicon Valley Startup. This was also followed by a podcast of the same name, and since then, there's already been a Hulu miniseries, The Dropout, which ends before any trial even takes place, and stars Amanda Seyfried and Naveen Andrews. There has also been an HBO docuseries called The Inventor, and on top of that, there is even a movie in the works which will star Jennifer Lawrence. So the story of Elizabeth Holmes is a big deal, and you should definitely look into it, as there's a lot of things I either brushed over or didn't talk about at all in this video. But this is how a Where Are They Now works. I give you guys a brief rundown, and now I want to know what you guys think. So be sure to leave comments down below with your thoughts, opinions, and suggestions for other people we should talk about in the future. I am Adam Andrews, this is Where Are They Now. I'll catch y'all on the flippy flop. Stay safe and well informed out there.